And some of the things that I've learned is that even if there's one activity, fraudulent activity going on, there's actually like a whole wealth of other problem areas all throughout the organization. One of them that I'll say that was quite strong was the culture of fear and silence. So they had sort of taken this mentality. At first I thought, oh, okay, the reason I'm signing an NDA when I go to interview for this company is, I don't know. I honestly didn't know, but I was young and I was like, sure, I'll sign whatever you want. I want to work here. But then when I realized they had me sign an NDA when I interviewed for the company, when I started working for the company, in the middle of working in the company, and definitely at the end.
Every day.
And was reminded constantly that if I said anything, that they would pursue litigation against me. And that the reason I couldn't put it on my LinkedIn that I worked for the organization or any of my roles and responsibilities is because of the threat of competitors. So they kind of really fostered this sort of air of, you can't say anything, don't tell anyone what we're doing, don't reveal any trade secrets, which is this like broad definition of basically don't say anything, even to your own significant other, like any role that you do, was a key red flag. Now I realize it's a red flag. It's not because we have a military culture, we have specialty, confidential contracts, because it wasn't like we had clearance for anything. It was just, that was the culture. And in addition to that, like the siloing, now it got to the point where that culture of trying to protect against competitors was really, how do you prevent people within the organization from even communicating with one another? So at one point, we had shared drives between the research team and the clinical lab team because we had to cross-communicate because we were leveraging information. Once we started raising red flags in the clinical lab, all of a sudden, people's drive access shut. We are put into like a completely separate lab where we are told we are not allowed to talk to anyone in any other department because we have confidential patient information. Stuff like that. So we were slowly being sequestered sort of in these different areas because they didn't want people in the clinical setting to start saying anything. Another indicator that I didn't realize when I was young, but now I realize, is that the staff was really young. And they didn't have any experience in terms of the domain that we were in. And essentially, for a lot of these roles, they didn't want to take people who had worked in a hospital for a decade and then would come in, see the experimental methodologies that we were using, because the moment that they would see them, they'd be like, what is this? What's going on here? So they took people fresh out of college, just like me, to sort of do all the dirty work. And they didn't know any better. They had no idea what was going on. They had no reference of what does a good laboratory look like. And when you're young, you're like, this is great. I'm with my peers. I have like this fun working environment with all these people who are in the same boat as me. But when it does get bad, that gets very scary because you're the first one to go. You're the first one that they blame. And I think now when I talk to students or other people, actually having these really young environments where you don't have a diversity of people with different expertise should be a bit concerning because they're going to be able to have more vantage points to ask the hard questions of like, is this right actually? Should this be what we're doing? And some other things, it's like if they're claiming sometimes like, oh, we're so revolutionary, the laws just don't apply to us. This was a big thing that Theranos would always claim. We can't be regulated because we are an entirely new product. And so the regulators don't even know what to do with us because there's no other product in this class. But that doesn't detract from like first principles of like, if you give people false information about their health status, you could kill them. If you are telling your investors, we have one thing and it doesn't exist, that's not okay. So, so it was this like bizarre justification of what the actual behaviors in the organization were, right? It wasn't sort of saying, I don't know, anytime I see companies that are too adversarial to regulators and not understanding, regulators are there to protect the public interest. Particularly in regulated spaces, there's a reason these institutions exist. So it doesn't have to be an adversarial relationship, but it really should be what are their goals? Who are they there to protect? And what do we need to keep into consideration about the way that we're building our business, knowing that they're going to be there to protect those interests, and that's okay, because that's what we need in order to have healthy, functioning societies, not only for society to sort of thrive, but also for even our organization to thrive. And so I think now that's been a kind of another indicator. If it's like we're so innovative, like no one can touch us, or people just don't understand what we're trying to do here. And it's like, no, a lot of people understand what you're trying to do. A lot of people want you to succeed, but that can't come at the cost of hurting people or really being highly detrimental to sort of the public interest.